Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 1, Text 6. Aduneha Mahabhaga Yataiva Narakandara Nanugra Yatanam Neyat Tanme Vyakyatum Arhasi Aduneha Mahabhaga Yataiva Narakandara Nanugra Yatanam Neyat Tanme Vyakyatum Arhasi Aduneha Mahabhaga Yataiva Narakandara Nanogra Yatananeya Tanme Vyakyatum Arhasi. Vaishnavis. Aduna, right now, in this material world, Mahabhaga, O greatly opulent and fortunate Shukadev Goswami. Yata, so that, Ava, indeed, Narakan, all the hellish conditions into which the impious are put. Nara, human beings, Nana, varieties of, Ugra, terrible, Yatanan, conditions of suffering, Na Yat, may not undergo, Tat, that, may, to me, Vyakyatum, Arhasi, please describe. Translation. Oh, greatly fortunate and opulent Shukadeva Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains. Purport. In the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, Shukadeva Goswami has explained that people who commit sinful acts are forced to enter into hellish planets and suffer. Now, Maharaj Parikshit, being a devotee, is concerned with how this can be stopped. A Vaishnava is para dukkha dukhi. In other words, he has no personal troubles, but he is very unhappy to see others in trouble. Prahlad Maharaj says, my Lord, I have no personal problems, for I have learned how to glorify your transcendental qualities and thus enter a trance of ecstasy. I do have a problem, however, for I am simply thinking of these rascals and fools who are busy with Maya Sukha, temporary happiness, without knowledge of devotional service unto you. This is the problem faced by a Vaishnava. Because a Vaishnava fully takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he personally has no problems. But because he is compassionate toward the fallen conditioned souls, he's always thinking of plans to save them from their hellish life in this body and the next. Parikshit Maharaj, therefore, anxiously wanted to know from Shukadeva Goswami how humanity can be saved from gliding down to hell. Shukadeva Goswami had already explained how people enter hellish life, and he could also explain how they could be saved from it. Intelligent men must take advantage of these instructions. Unfortunately, however, the entire world is lacking Krishna consciousness, and therefore people are suffering from the grossest ignorance and do not even believe in a life after this one. To convince them of their next life is very difficult because they have become almost mad in their pursuit of material enjoyment. Nevertheless, our duty, the duty of all sane men, is to save them. Maharaj Parikshit is the representative of one who can save them. Translation again. O greatly fortunate and opulent Shukadeva Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains. Om Jnana-Timradantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just see Parikshit Maharaj showing you the heart of a bhakti yogi. What is his situation? Don't forget, he's to die in a few days. And here he is so concerned about everyone else. Here's a person who had power, opulence, everything going his way. And he's cursed to die in 7 days. And he's so concerned about the destination of everyone else. Parikshit Maharaj is showing us what the behavior of a real devotee is. And to whom is he speaking? He's speaking to Mahabhaga. Now, how can Shukadeva Goswami be called greatly opulent and fortunate, Mahabhaga? Shukadeva Goswami didn't even have clothes on his back. Yet the Bhagavatam is describing him as opulent and fortunate because Shukadeva is equipped with the highest knowledge and the highest realization of that knowledge. So much so that when there was confusion, or better put, lack of agreement amongst the rishis, the sadhus, the sages, the yogis, the mystics, who came from all over the universe to witness Pritchett Maharaj's departure. There was disagreement about what is the best thing for him to do. You had some sadhus, some holy persons who were attached to going to the higher planets. Others, no doubt, were liberationists wanting to merge into Brahman. Others were Paramatmavadis, those meditating on the super soul in the heart. There was disagreement. And Pritchett Maharaj, being a magnanimous Vaishnava, wanted unanimity. He knew what to do, but he wanted to set the example. And therefore, he noted there's not agreement in this audience of such celebrated spiritual personalities. I want agreement so that it's permanently recorded as to what is the best thing to do at the time of death. And that means what's the best thing to do at all times, because at every moment we're about to die. I know it sounds negative and discouraging, but an intelligent person always keeps death in front, always thinking it can come at any moment. What's my life about? Where is my life going? So Pritchett Maharaj's questions are very essential. And it was Shukadeva Goswami, you remember from the first canto, who clarified the whole situation. And Shukadeva Goswami, how does he look? He wears no clothes. He's just like a 16-year-old boy. He was surrounded by ladies and children making fun of him. But when Shukadeva entered the arena of the sadhus, the ladies and children realized, oh, wait a minute, everyone's showing such reverence toward him. And they quieted down. So this is the opulence and fortune of Shukadeva Goswami. He's often described in the Bhagavatam as being the eye of the worlds. He sees everything. How does he see everything? Is he omniscient? No, he sees through the eyes of Shastra. Therefore, he sees everything. It may take a while for us to understand what it means to see through the eyes of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. It sounds perhaps theoretical to us. How can you see through a book? Whether it's a Kindle or a printed book, how do you see through it? But the more you immerse your intelligence in hearing and chanting about Krishna, especially in the association of devotees, the more you start to understand and experience what it means to see through the pages. So this is why Shukadeva Goswami is called the eye of the world. It's not that he's omniscient. Sometimes people think, sometimes devotees think, the spiritual master should know everything. He should, in terms of anything that's going on. No, the guru knows as much as Krishna reveals to him. The jiva is not omniscient, but because there's the super soul in everyone's heart, through the super soul, mata smritir, jnanam apohanam cha, comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Sometimes devotees think, oh, Srila Prabhupada must have known this, he must have known that. But again, the jiva is not omniscient. The perfection of a genuine representative of Krishna is in the teaching and the preaching of the Bhakti knowledge and the Bhakti path. That's the perfection, not being omniscient, but depending on Krishna in all situations. So this is how Shukadeva Goswami can be called the eye of the world, or eye of the worlds. Through the super soul, he knows what he needs to know. And sees with realization. So just see, once again, Pritchett Maharaj's situation. He's about to die, and he's heard about how there are different destinations according to different inclinations for the results of different activities. So this is a very important concept for us to understand, especially in the Western world. We say actions have reactions, but do we really know what that means? Different actions bring about different destinations. We take our current destination for granted, but anyone here could have easily been born in another part of the world. That's completely nonstop trouble. So you can look at this planet, as I often explain, and see that there are different regions, different locales, with differing degrees of happiness and distress. So why then, when you hear Shukadeva Goswami describe about the hellish regions, you think, oh, it's mythology, it's just meant to scare us. There are so many places on this planet that are scary. I was just reading about how in Bangladesh, because there's so much deforestation, so many trees have been cut down. When lightning strikes, it has nowhere to go except kill people. Every year, something like 250 people in Bangladesh die from a lightning strike. Just recently, there was a wedding boat with the groom on it and relatives, and they were celebrating and going to meet the bride. And then lightning struck and 17 people died. You're having a joyous wedding party, and this is what happens. But because of what human beings have done to nature, chopped down all the trees aren't there anymore to attract the lightning. So you might say, well, that won't happen here because we have government regulations. No, here only in the middle of the night, the buildings shake, that's all. That's normal, right? No problem. So we need to digest the concept, the reality that there are different locales and regions everywhere, not just on the Earth planet, but throughout the universe. And those different locales are for persons with different inclinations, which are the result of their activities. Of course, everything is relative. What you consider miserable, someone else might consider satisfactory. I remember when I first came to New Zealand in 1993, someone was telling me about a particular section in Auckland, South Auckland, Otara. Don't go there. Otara. It's notorious for just being the worst. I said, well, why do you say that? 2 years ago, someone was killed. They're telling this to a New Yorker, you know. 2 years ago, someone was killed in Otara. Don't go there. I said, well, can you tell me more about it? Oh, it's just a horrible place. So actually, I happened to be going with someone to South Auckland, and I said, take me to Otara. What was I expecting to see? Broken glass covering the street, crowds of unemployed men just hanging out in the street corner. That's what I expected, you know. But so they took me to Otara, and I said, well, you know, where is everyone? Where's house after house that's demolished or abandoned? Try to buy a house in Otara now. I'm trying to buy any house in New Zealand, try to buy it. So I expected to see derelict housing and, you know, just people laying out on the roads and broken glass and bricks everywhere and busted cars. And I didn't see that. But to the Kiwis, 2 years ago, some unfortunate person was killed. Therefore, it's a very dangerous area. Just like in the USA, when they hear about the restrictions for COVID that you have here and in Australia, they can't believe it. Like in Sydney now, the army is going door to door with the police to make sure people are informed that if you're on the quarantine list, you got to stay inside. Americans would consider that to be hell. The army coming to my door? What a violation of constitutional rights. I'd rather die from COVID than have this happen. The American saying is, give me liberty or give me death. Well, so what is tolerable in one place is poison in another place. Not only on the Earth planet, but throughout the universe. Now you could say, but we don't see that. Therefore, you have to take shelter of Shukadeva Goswami and see through his words. That is not religious or dogmatic. That is a spiritually scientific experience. So Pritchett Maharaj is actually astonished. You have to get the emotions in Bhagavatam. It's not a dry philosophical treatise. It's packed with rasa, flavor, transcendental flavor. So what's going on here is astonishment on behalf of Pritchett Maharaj. Why don't people want to avoid all that suffering in their future? I'm amazed. Why would they act in such a way as to suffer in the future? Don't they know that their actions lead to specific destinations? Again, we should think about that. This is a destination where you are now, and you're going to another destination. Remember that earlier in Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami had spoken about the path to the heavenly planets. We don't believe that either, right? We don't believe in hellish or heavenly. It's just whatever's here right in front of our nose, that's reality. But anyway, the Bhagavatam teaches us about the path to the heavenly planets and even back to Godhead, back to the spiritual world through the heavenly planets, the slow train. So Pritchett Maharaj has the confidence. Shukadeva Goswami, you can teach how to go to the heavenly planets, and you can also teach how to become relieved from the hellish planets. You can tell it all. So please, how do we get relief from going to hellish destinations? Because I'm astonished that people aren't interested in this. As a chief executive, now retired, of course, and facing death, Pritchett Maharaj knows that people are going to commit bad karma. And this chapter will go deeper into that. Even if you tell them, don't do it, even if they make wrongdoings and are punished, they'll still do it again. He knows that from his experience as the chief executive. So therefore, this dialogue with Shukadeva Goswami is developing. What to do, because it is a fact that your karma takes you to destinations. So what to do about the inevitable bad karma that you'll do, which will take you to a hellish destination. What are we going to do about that? That is Pritchett Maharaj's concern. Why should he be concerned with that? We hear so wondrously in the purport how a Vaishnava is para dukkha dukhi. This is the paradox, which I love to point out. And that paradox is most ingeniously presented by Prahlad Maharaj. I'm fine. I've got no problems. I know how to be absorbed in the Mahamrita, the great nectarian ocean of hearing and chanting about Krishna. So I've got no problems. I've got no concerns for myself. But then again, I do have a problem. Shoche tatoba mukha chetasa indriyarta maya sukhaya baram udvahato vimudan. I'm lamenting for the countless conditioned living entities. Why am I lamenting for them? Because they're struggling under a false burden. Maya sukhaya baram. I often point out, you don't want to struggle under a real burden, but to struggle under a false burden, that is certainly ignorance. So Prahlad Maharaj explains, Maya Sakhaya Baram Udvahato, meaning they're making grand plans, clever plans, complicated plans to struggle with a false, unnecessary burden. So you can become very fascinated by the grandiose plans and the intricacies and the engineering and the technology, but it's all for struggling under an unnecessary burden. So this is Prahlad Maharaj. Shoche tatova mukha chetasa indriyarta maya sukhaya baram udvahato vimuda. Vimudha, you know what that means. Super fool. So you can see the whole development of human society through these words by Prahlad Maharaj. People actually don't know what is happiness. If they can forget their sorrows, they think, oh, I'm happy. And that so-called happiness comes in different flavors according to their karma. So Pritchett Maharaj knows that people's next situation is linked to their current situation. Their actions result in destinations. He also knows that it's the natural tendency of the conditioned soul to seek better and better material conditions. How to have a better and better situation. So that will always be a material aspiration unless people hear about Krishna Lila, Krishna's pastimes, and they are informed of the goal to go back to Krishna. If they don't know about that, they'll simply try for better and better conditions in the material world. And those who especially do that seek out going to the higher planets. They're thinking, I don't simply want to enjoy in this lifetime, I want to enjoy in the next life too. Of course, it's difficult to meet such persons today because the path of karma kanda, the path of performing pious activities to get a better birth in the next life, is practically forgotten. This is the darkness of the age of Kali. Everything becomes obscured. Everything becomes confused. So it's hard to find a real mystic yogi who's practicing the Ashtanga yoga system. It's hard to find a Jnana yogi who's trying to analyze what is eternal, what is temporary. It's hard finding a Paramatmavadi, someone who's truly focused on the Paramatma, the super soul in the heart. And what to speak about, it's hard to find someone who's what Prabhupada calls fruitive worker, someone who wants the fruits of going to the higher planets. It's hard. Everything's just ignorance these days. You can check yourself out and feel that ignorance. Why care so much about my next destination? I want to be happy now. I want to feel good now. This is what's been instilled in us, right? Am I happy right now? What can I do to make myself momentarily happy? Momentary happiness is good enough. Good enough. You can recite that to yourself. Momentary happiness is good enough. I could use more of that. And you become envious of those who have momentary happiness. Wow, you were happy for a moment. Good on you. How did you do it? Well, it just lasted for a few minutes. That's all right, I'll take it. This is the darkness of Kali Yuga. So Prahlad Maharaj, in that famous verse, says, I'm lamenting. I do have a problem, even though I have no problems. For myself, I got no problems, but I'm perplexed by the problem of what to do about these persons in ignorance who are trapped in temporary happiness. So he has confidence in Shukadeva Goswami. You've explained how they can glide down to hellish situations. I probably said before, I like how Prabhupada uses that word gliding down. You can see yourself in a glider and just, it looks very graceful. But where are you going? One of those gliders that when they were tourists in New Zealand that the people would love to go on, hang gliders or something, or what are they called? Bungee jumping, but there's also these gliders, parachute gliders. Yes. Paragliding, yes. Anyone have done that? So people report it's such a wonderful feeling, just floating, gliding through the air. And so therefore, gliding to hellish conditions, it seems to feel so wonderful. But where are you going? Oh, don't worry about that. Just feel the glide. So Parikshit Maharaj has the confidence. Shukadeva Goswami, you've already explained how people can enter hellish conditions. So therefore, you can explain how they can be rescued from such hellish destinations. So at the end of the purport, Prabhupada is expressing in his transcendental way how outreach is not always easy. In fact, it's rarely easy. Because people don't even believe in a next life after this one. Or if they talk about a next life, it's very casual. Well, I guess, the next life I'll do this or that, but they're saying it in kind of a pop casual way. So Srila Prabhupada is expressing the difficulty in doing outreach. He says, to convince them of their next life is very difficult because they've become almost mad in their pursuit of material enjoyment. Nevertheless, our duty, the duty of all sane men, is to save them. Maharaj Parikshit is the representative of one who can save them. So please remember this paradox. I have no problems, but then again, I do have a problem. I'm happy, but then again, there's one thing I'm not happy about. So that is the heart of a bhakti yogi. It's so wonderful seeing when hordes of persons come on Sunday. They're chanting. Some of them are dancing. They're taking prasad happily. They're talking with the bhakti yogis. You can see that they're actually enlivened. And we get enlivened by seeing that. They're blown away by the prasad. I was watching one young man seated over there in the corner during the kirtan last Sunday, and he was just enthusiastically chanting the Maha Mantra. He didn't understand any philosophy. He didn't know what he was doing, but he was just right into it. So all those activities are proceeding from the heart of the bhakti yogi, who is, maybe you can't say you have no problems, but you're progressing to the point where you have no problems, and then your problem becomes everyone else's problems. How to get them, how to inspire them to make spiritual advancement. I often say that when you get to the point in your spiritual life in which you have no problems, Krishna gives you everyone else's problems. And that's why Krishna says, Natachasma manusheshu kaschin me priya kritama. There's no one more dear, nor will there ever be one more dear than the one who tries to teach and distribute my glories to others, because it's not easy. You're dealing with persons who are convinced that they're healthy, or maybe not healthy, but not completely healthy, but generally okay, good enough. And yes, we come from those ranks. So bhakti, as we'll be discussing, is the pinnacle of not simply human development, but it's the pinnacle of spiritual development. You're supposed to come to bhakti after going through all the preliminary phases: good karma, jnana, metaphysical knowledge, mystic yoga. You're supposed to have done all that. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, and it's not just poetry, Bahunam jamanam ante jnanavam mam prapadyate vasudeva saramiti samahatma sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, you finally understand that Krishna's energy is everything. And therefore, Krishna is everything because his energy is everything. After many births and deaths. So how is it that you have established yourself or want to establish yourself in bhakti? Have you done the path of karma? Have you done the path of jnana, the path of Ashtanga yoga? No. Good fortune has landed on your lap. That good fortune has been established by Krishna's representatives. Srila Prabhupada told us when devotees would ask him, well, it takes so much qualification and preliminary phases to come to bhakti. We don't have that. We don't have a background of pious activities, a background of mystic yoga, genuine mystic yoga, or Jnanamarg, the path of metaphysical speculation, austerity, penance, all those things. We don't have that. And Srila Prabhupada replied that, he said, I created your qualifications. So that is an example, a stellar, most prominent example of the value of associating with a devotee. even just to understand that nature is the energy of the ultimate source, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's so difficult. In a previous purport, we've read, unfortunately, the unintelligent cannot immediately understand Krishna's supremacy. Nonetheless, if they associate with devotees and read authorized books, they may gradually come to the proper understanding, although this may take many, many births. So the Bhakti Yogi is realistic. It's not that everyone is an instant conversion, whatever that is. You're dealing with persons who, even though they're reading authorized books and even they're associating with devotees to some extent, it may take them many, many births to come to the proper understanding, for things to gel, for things to be activated. You have to start somewhere. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Jamanam Ante, after many births and deaths. So we need to have a sense of how we've been wandering. And we spoke about this 2 weeks ago. The Bhagavatam is giving you a sense of the whole rotating nature of our journey through material existence. Up, down, up, down, up, down. This body, this species, that species. You start to get dizzy when you read this. When is it going to stop? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. When is it going to stop? So Pritchard Maharaj is concerned. We've got to tell others how to stop this. This sixth canto is known as Poshana, protection. The previous fifth canto was known as maintenance. And you need some help from the acharyas to understand why cantos have their particular names. So for the sixth canto, for protection, who's being protected in the sixth canto? Number one is Ajamil, a fallen devotee. He's protected because at the last moment of his life, he called out Narayan. Who else is protected in the sixth canto? Indra, he offended his guru. Who else in the sixth canto was protected? Chitraketu offended Lord Shiva. Although Lord Shiva understood Chitraketu is just joking, and Chitraketu and he exchanged joking words, but Parvati had another way of looking at the situation. So that's the sixth canto. Protection even of the lowest behaving Ajamil or Indra, with opulence beyond what we can imagine. Chitraketu, who had such mystic powers. Remember, he was traveling all over the universe in his heavenly aircraft. You may say, oh, mythology. But what do all the billionaires in this world have? They all have their luxury private aircraft, all decked out. Just like you might see a upper middle class person or middle class person driving a camper van. It's really swish, really decked out. In the US, they call them RVs, recreational vehicles. And many people just live in them. They're just like a home on wheels. So that you accept, yeah, people can live in these camper homes, caravans, and they can be very well furnished and all the mod cons. That's not mythology. But Chitraketu and his aircraft, oh, I mean, really, traveling around the universe, checking out the girls, can't be true. He needs to get out on Vivian Street and walk to Cuba and turn the corner, and that's those are the heavenly places. We have this tendency to reduce everything to what's in our mundane conceptions. So that's the sixth canto, Poshana, protection. You might have never thought about it in that way. Indra being protected, Chitraketu being protected, but they slipped up. Still, because they're devotees, they were protected. So before we go to the next verse, let's remember Parikshit Maharaj's concern. Let's not be selfish. Yes, the work can be grueling. You're trying to convince persons who are sick, but they think they're healthy. There can be so much pain and so much austerity. As Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, it takes hundreds of liters of blood to bring one person to bhakti. Hundreds of liters of blood just to bring one person to bhakti. And if you all want to please Krishna and become most dear to Krishna, you will experience that, expending hundreds of liters of your blood, sweat, and tears just to help one person. And then that person may criticize you, condemn you. This is why outreach attracts Krishna's attention. Parikshit Maharaj has this concern, even though he's about to give up his body. How can people be elevated, not just materially elevated? He knows they have that tendency already. If they don't know about the supreme destination, it's natural they'll simply think in terms of material elevation. Just like someone who's living in Newtown thinks, well, let me move to a better suburb, or let me move to Kapiti Coast, or wherever. There are better schools, better houses, better views of the ocean. That's the tendency of the conditioned soul. Let me enjoy better. And if you don't know about what is truly better, that's what you're going to think about. Upgrade, upgrade, upgrade constantly, if you have the wherewithal to do that. So Parikshit Maharaj knows that psychology. Let's give them information of the real upgrade. Otherwise, they'll just try to upgrade materially, and they'll suffer for that. So verse 7, there used to be a clock here, didn't there? Shri Shuka Uvacha Nachad Ihaiva Pachitim Yatam Yasa Kritasya Kuryan Mana Uktapani Bi Dhruvam Savai Precha Narakanupaiti Ye Kirtita Me Babatas Tigmayatana. Shukadeva Goswami replied, my dear king, if before one's next death, whatever impious acts one has performed in this life with his mind, words, and body are not counteracted through proper atonement, according to the description of the Manu Samhita and other Dharma Shastras, one will certainly enter the hellish planets after death and undergo terrible suffering, as I have previously described to you. So this is Shukadeva Goswami laying down the law. There are certain things you have to do before your next death, because no doubt you've performed impious activities, bad karma. You've done that bad karma with your mind, your words, and your body. So that karma has to be counteracted through proper atonement. Not a very familiar word, is it? Atonement. There's a list of words that practically, at least in New Zealand, you never hear. I've told you before about how once at the loft, a group of high school girls came and they were bubbling with curiosity, and they're about 16, 17. So I asked them, we were talking about the yoga principles and exotic topics like purification. And so I mentioned the word purification. I said, oh, all right, I know you, because Bhagavad Gita says no one can be a yogi without purifying the body, mind, and so forth. Purification, does that word make sense to you? No. So I tried to find other words. And then I just asked them, hey, maybe you know what this word means, chaste. And they all looked at me like, chaste? It sounds like something from the Middle Ages. So similarly, atonement. Atonement, what does that mean? It means you've got to counteract the bad karma with the good karma. Otherwise, you're stuck with those reactions, which will take you to a destination that's full of suffering. And Shukadeva Goswami is saying you'll certainly enter those suffering destinations. And I've already, he tells Pritchett, I've already described that in the 5th canto. Now the question is, and it's raised by Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, why didn't Shukadeva Goswami immediately speak about bhakti? He's not got there yet. What's his reason? He's testing Pritchett's intelligence. He wants Pritchett to push him. Well, these lower levels of purification, atonement, counteraction don't really work out. You've got to go higher. You've got to go higher. So this is what Shukadeva Goswami is doing on purpose. He's stimulating the dialogue, so he doesn't reveal the real solution immediately. He could have done that immediately, but he's getting Pritchett Maharaj to push him for our benefit. So I know this word atonement sounds quite exotic. It just means counteraction of, should we use the word sinful activity? Well, that sounds really intimidating, doesn't it? Sinful activity. Have you done any sinful activities? They can just say, hey, none of your business. Reminds me of when your prime minister was answering media questions from the American media, the USA, the storehouse of Dharma. So, so they were asking about her partner situation. So, well, you just gave birth, right? And are you engaged? Are you married? In other words, the USA is a God-fearing Christian country and with lots of nuclear weapons. And you're a prime minister and you're giving birth and so what's the story here? She gave them a good Kiwi answer. Mind your own business. This is New Zealand. We do what we want. We're not hampered by those antiquated religious considerations. So yes, the word sinful activities sound very retro. Well, choose another word, then bad karma. Actions that lead to painful reactions. But the principle is that Shukadeva Goswami is saying these bad karmas have to be counteracted. Now, how are you going to do it? Remember Chaitanya Charitamrita, the history of Subhuti Roy? Anyone remember that? He was a wealthy landowner, and he had a Muslim servant who was working for him. And the Muslim servant, to whom Subhuti Roy treated like his own son, but still, this was a servant. The servant made some mistake, as servants, household servants are prone to do. And maybe he pilfered something, or maybe something happened. And so Subhuti Roy had the servant whipped a bit on his back. Now, the way the world of karma works is who's on top today could be on the bottom tomorrow. And who's on the bottom today could be on the top tomorrow. So this servant, this Muslim servant, eventually became a big power broker, a big emperor-like. He had that kind of position in the Muslim regime. And so one day, his wife noticed on his bare back, what are those whip marks? And so, and the former servant, who's now a big kingpin in the Muslim regime, replied, well, when I was young, I made a mistake, and my benefactor, who treated me so fatherly, Subhuti Roy, chastised me. He put some whip marks on my back. I don't feel any animosity. He cared for me so much. But what do you think her reaction was? Kill him. He said, well, how can I kill him? He's my benefactor. But if people see those marks on your back, they'll know that you were once a servant, a menial servant, instead of the Raj, the Muslim term is, instead of the Lord and Master. So we don't want people to uncover that history. Therefore, the only solution is you got to kill Subhuti Roy, because now you're the boss. You've got more power than him. This is a viciousness that is so endemic and so pervasive in the material world. Subhuti, the Muslim former servant, now a big political gun, he felt no animosity, but his wife wanted to be vicious. So she kept telling him, kill him, kill him, kill him. And he protested. So finally she pushed him and pushed him and pushed him. So he said, all right, I'm not going to kill Subhuti Roy, but I'll tell you what, I'll turn him into a Muslim. So the understanding, the foolish understanding back then was that if you just have a water pot containing drinking water of a Muslim, and the Muslim sprinkles water on the Hindu automatically becomes a Muslim. This is superficial dharma. This is just shows ignorance. But people were thinking that. Like just during the riots in India decades ago, the Muslims are said to have forced the Hindus to eat cow's flesh because that automatically meant they were now a Muslim. So of course, you would say, look, someone sprinkles water on me, big deal. I'm in a water pot, you know. If I have to go through the horror of someone forcing me to eat cow's flesh, it doesn't change my consciousness, my convictions. It doesn't change anything about me. It's just a horrible experience. But people have this external understanding of Dharma, so they took it that seriously. Oh, you've been sprinkled by water from a Muslim's water pot. Your caste is lost. You're now a Muslim. So this was done to Subhuti Roy. And he didn't know what to do now. He didn't know what to do. So he went to consult the Bhattacharya Brahmanas. These are Brahmanas who specialize in recommending atonement, a certain activity to cleanse a certain karmic activity. In old cities in India, decades ago, there were sections of the city for the Bhattacharya Brahmanas, and you go to them. Of course, you pay them something, and and they prescribe, oh, you should do this, you should do that. So what did they tell him? How do you deal with the fact that someone sprinkled water on you and now you're a Muslim? You've got to drink a liter of molten lead. So Subhuti Roy wasn't so eager to do that. So he consulted various of these Brahmanas, these externalist Brahmanas, or Karmakanda Brahmanas, and none of them could give him a solution that made sense. The ignorance was so pervasive, even among the Brahmana sector of society. So Subhuti Roy happened to go to Vrindavan, and there he met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who heard the situation and said, you just chant Hare Krishna. At the first trace of pure chanting, all your material attachments are gone. Just a shadow of pure chanting, and you're liberated. So this is how fortunate we are to chant Hare Krishna. An intelligent person is concerned. What about my reactions that are in store for me? We don't like it that there are directives, there are codes of human behavior. We should decide what's good for us, right? That sounds like the best life, right? I feel that I should be acting in this way. Isn't it so old-fashioned and ancient history to conform to some prescriptions in some text or someone else's conceptions? Be free. But in the name of freedom, people simply suffer more and more. This is why Prahlad Maharaj says, Maya Sukhaya Balam Unvahato Vimuddha. Struggling with grand plans for carrying a false burden. Not even a real burden, an imaginary burden. We've got to do this, we've got to do that. This is what life is meant for. You create this false burden and then make these grandiose plans how to achieve. Meanwhile, you're here just for a few decades. Then you're gone. Where do you go? Well, what happens, happens. Probably it'll be nothing. So this is the ignorance that is so all-pervasive. And that's why you don't see people pouring into the doors. Give me knowledge. What's my next life going to be? No. You're dealing with such saturated ignorance that people are immobilized in terms of their genuine aspirations. And oh, their senses are raging so much. If you've been following the regular principles for a while, you forgot what it's like to have raging, blazing senses that are never satisfied. Like Prahlad Maharaj says, it's like a person with 5 partners. Each sense is trying to take you in a different direction. Each of your 5 senses is trying to carry you off here, carry you off there. Not just one, but it's all going on all at once. You've forgotten what that's like. To engage in material activities which never give satisfaction, but you can't stop engaging in them. It's hellish, but we're so quick to forget. So Pritchard Maharaj wants to do something about that. He's placing the whole situation of human behavior. He's laying it out before you. How are they going to be purified? How are they going to counteract what they've done? They've got to do that before the next death comes. A technical point that we'll hear tomorrow, because tomorrow we'll start dealing with the first apparent solutions that Shukadeva Goswami offers in order to test Pritchard Maharaj's intelligence. But you're going to hear that quickly you should adopt the process of atonement. Otherwise, the longer you put it off, the worse the reactions get. If there's too much delay, the reactions double. Say, well, why does that have to be, First of all, it's my business if I get around to such a thing as atonement. And secondly, when I do it is also my affair. But the laws of nature are so tight. They have us so tightly bound, and we don't feel that. We're free to express ourselves, to go here, go there, be with this one, be with that one. But through the eyes of knowledge, you can see we're just free to suffer in this way, free to suffer in that way. So to see people with such uncontrolled senses, to see them with uncontrolled minds that are just burning is very horrible. But because the ignorance is so pervasive, it looks like it's normal. So Pritchard Maharaj is concerned, and Shukadeva Goswami is going to give him the first offer. Okay, here's what you do. It's not the best one, but Shukadeva Goswami is laying out the whole panorama. Well, there's this. What do you think about that? And you're going to hear Pritchard Maharaj say, it's not going to work. Balancing the bad karma with good karma, it's not going to work because persons will still have the tendency, the nature to commit bad karma. The whole discussion is going to focus on how to get to the root of the problem, not just deal with the externals. And getting to the root of the problem means bhakti, destroying the root of contaminated consciousness. But we'll take a while to get there.